Probably wise to just acknowledge that we're able to have this conversation on the traditional territory, unceded territory of the Snuneymuxw people. And my name is Rob Ferguson, and I work within the Department of Recreation and Tourism Management here at Vancouver Island University as a faculty member. It's a partnership between the Heiltsuk First Nation and Bella Bella, North Island College, and Vancouver Island University. It's an externally funded program, and it's funded through the BC Ministry of Advanced Education underneath the Aboriginal Community-Based Training Partnerships Program. And that program requires an Indigenous community to partner with a post-secondary institution in order to access the funds and deliver curriculum of value. It's post-secondary level training, so the age group are adults that meet university entrance requirements. But really, that's it. So we've had participants involved from 18, fresh out of high school, all the way up. And there's been a wide range of folks involved from a number of different territories and nations in our region. The aim of the program is really about building capacity in our rural, remote, coastal Indigenous communities within our region to take advantage of the growing demand for Indigenous cultural tourism in BC. So the tourism industry in British Columbia is upwards of $16 billion in revenue per year. And under the leadership of the Aboriginal Tourism Association of BC, there's a need to grow the supply of authentic Indigenous cultural tourism experiences. And so the aim of this program is to provide learners with applied field-based teaching and learning that will enable them to be have job-ready skills to get going right away. And a big part of that program is involved with paid or unpaid internships with different Indigenous cultural tourism operators throughout the region. The part that I'm most proud of is the way that our team, I mentioned Heiltsuk Tribal Council, North Island College, and Vancouver Island University all coming together to share their expertise and what they bring to the table. And that sharing has been done in a very respectful, and collaborative way, to the point where we are teaching shoulder to shoulder in the teaching space. So we're sharing that space together. And what we're trying to do is bring Western theory, if we can use that language, and marry that and match that, or add value to that with the cultural knowledge that our partners bring. And we also do that in community. So rather than bring everybody to campus and we're stuck in a classroom here on campus, we take our students to a community where we spend a period of time together in an intensive experiential learning activity where we're engaging with local knowledge keepers, hereditary leadership, elected leadership, Indigenous cultural tour operators, and we're learning from them as to what's working in that community, and then sharing, and we share back. And it's been an incredible, enriching experience to be able to do that and see our students grow and mature through that process. So that partnership piece, I think, we can't say enough about that. And we've been through several years of this program now, and we're committed to success. So it hasn't always been easy when we sit down together and discuss curriculum or teaching learning strategies. At times we disagree. And when I say we, I mean all of the partners, right? When we sit around the table. And so it requires us to have a dialogue and to understand each other and understand what we're trying to achieve. And the result is really quite something. It's quite something special that we're very pleased to continue. So what we did was we recruited somebody that we all respect, who is arm's reach of the team. And we brought that person in, gave them a label almost like a critical friend. And we asked them to evaluate our success, evaluate our program. And a couple metrics that we use are probably traditional or obvious. We think about academic achievement, what were the grades? How many people did we start with? How many learners did we begin, and how many were we able to finish with, successfully complete? We're above the 95% rate for that. It's exceptional. And is our partnership resilient? Are our processes appropriate? When challenges arise, are we able to navigate those successfully together? Because remembering we're looking at two different institutions and also a community practice on how to resolve challenges, and challenges are going to occur no matter what. So how do we resolve those? So how do we evaluate success based upon those metrics? And for me, it's whether or not that partnership is sustained. Are we willing at the end of that project, are we willing to work together again? And we are, and we continue to. As a matter of fact, it's spurred off other activity around research in the community, around scholarship, in terms of understanding more about Indigenous education and what it means in post-secondary. And what we haven't done, but what I really want to do, is get a better understanding where our graduates are. We're relatively new, so there's not a whole lot of graduates out there in the world, but we keep in touch, and it's great to see this growing network of Indigenous professionals within our area that are really adding value to the industry and their community and what they do. From my perspective, my understanding of Indigenous education is really that education that focuses on the knowledge and ways of understanding the world and relationships associated with Indigenous culture. That's how I understand Indigenous education, and obviously that's not something that is in my expertise. So I'm very grateful that when we're talking about Indigenous tourism, I can speak about what I understand and what I know, which is the tourism sector, the tourism world, and then I'm there with my community counterpart who speaks to the cultural relevancy of what we're doing and puts it in context to the community that we're in, and makes it meaningful to the students. So I really like that approach to teaching and learning, and ensuring that it's authentic and that the Indigenous voice is present. So in the post-secondary discussion across the country, we've got this idea of indigenizing the curriculum across the university programming, from chemistry to English to history, geography, tourism, and business studies. And the challenge for us, I think, is understanding what that means. We're not there yet. I think some institutions across the country are ahead. Some might be getting ahead of themselves. And here at Vancouver Island University, I'm very grateful for our leadership and the institutional mandate that we have under that sort of umbrella and theme. And I'm looking forward to understanding more about how we can progress that and make our curriculum, I mean that with a capital C now, across the scope of what we do, more accessible, more culturally relevant for our Indigenous learners and our non-Indigenous learners as well. The previous years for me have been very immersive in the context of Indigenous teaching and learning. I have been very blessed and very grateful for what's been shared with me by different folks. And I really feel personally that I've grown a great deal. So the reason I say that is I recognize the value that Indigenous perspective brings to teaching and learning across the board. So what I would love to see is a greater acceptance and a greater acknowledgement of Indigenous ways of knowing, however we want to define that, but really that relationship between people, the land, and each other, and seeing how that can be more effectively integrated, acknowledged within other aspects of the post-secondary education system. And I mean from governance right down to operations of our campuses. That can do nothing but enrich the experience here on campus for everybody and create a much more equal platform for positive discussions as we move forward. Is not necessarily more money. I'm not convinced that I need more money, but what would be ideal is for those fundings, those resources to be better aligned. So when I look across the assets and the resources that the post-secondary institution brings to bear, governmental organizations bring to bear, communities have at their disposal, and you notice disconnects in how those funding and those resources are allocated, and those disconnects could be in terms of timing. The certain dates you have to put your proposal in or get feedback from, or they could be in where they're allocated, so in terms of projects. And what I'd like to see is greater alignment amongst how those resources are used in order to better support student success. So not necessarily more money, but more effective use of resources available. And I'm grateful again for the leadership here within the institution in terms of ensuring Indigenous perspectives are part of our strategic mandate. But that allows people like me the opportunity then to talk about it in our different work units, in our departments, in our faculty, knowing that we are accountable to that strategic direction. I'd also like to see more uptake, more engagement from colleagues across academia. And I think my instinct is that there's a great deal of anxiety and an element of fear on what that might mean. Some people feel very uncomfortable engaging in this area, and that's completely understandable. I do too. I have a level of discomfort as well. And I think the only way to overcome that comfort is to recognize the human story we have in our area. That requires us to become curious, respectfully curious, and better understand those stories and that history. And it also requires us to gain competence in terms of understanding Indigenous culture and understanding about how to engage appropriately with that. And through that competence, we can each of us have greater confidence then to engage in dialogue respectfully. So I think that's where we're at. I think we're at that level where we are gaining competence. And the more opportunities we have for that as faculty and staff and admin to learn from Indigenous leaders and knowledge keepers and colleagues and scholars and students in order to help everyone have a better understanding of each other, I'm convinced that, again, that'll lead to richer dialogue. But a little bit of discomfort I feel is helpful, because it gives us that sort of feeling that there's something at stake and that we're taking the conversation seriously, and we recognize that our words and actions matter. So I hope I never get comfortable, because that might be a sign of a bit of arrogance, might be a sign of taking things for granted, recognizing how much work it has taken, how much pain it has taken, how much suffering has taken to get to where we are today and where we need to go in the future.